So this is the first edition of the KhoodeelaarTV world exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street. That is the London-based newspapers published in English, of course, because London has got many languages that are used to publish outfits that address particular linguistic groups. They are never recognized and acknowledged. And the reason is that they are not distributed normally through the ordinary outlets where the 10 titles today, we obtained 10 titles today. The 10 are the I newspaper, £1.20, Financial Times Saturday, £4, Daily Mirror Saturday, £1.40, The Guardian Saturday, £3.20, Daily Star, 80 pence, Daily Borisgraph, £2.80, The Murdoch Times, £2.20, The Sun Saturday, 85 pence, The Daily Mail, £1.10, Saturday Daily Express, £1.10. That's how many are there? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 of those, excluding the Communist Party Morning Star, which again is not available through the ordinary outlets. Very small number of the outlets keep the Morning Star, which maximum number of copies that it supplies to the outlets would be 2 or 3 at the most. And it takes an extra journey around the area lasting about 1.5 hours to find the outlet and pick it up. So that is why the normal daily list of purchases only contains the ones that are read there mainly. And the Financial Times and the I newspaper don't publish on the Sundays, just as the Morning Star doesn't publish on Sundays. They have the Saturday edition covering both Saturday and Sunday, and they call them weekend editions. So the pagination, the 10 papers that we have, including their so-called supplements, say would be about 4,000 pages. On average, say 400 pages each. And most of the contents are not worth including in a diagnostic kind of program, because they are really like ordinary stuff that don't need any analytical discussions about them, except if this program turned into an ethical examination of the contents of these outlets. So we are concentrating on the obviously political and social and other relevant news items that they are treating. The word treating is intended to mean that they're not necessarily telling the truth about the news. They're treating, meaning they're referring to them and they're carrying their agenda and the narrative through them. There is the usual kind of display of suspects in the Murdoch Times. The Murdoch Times has got a couple of things about the Labour Party and the soul of the Labour Party, and several pieces denouncing Jeremy Corbyn, and one piece by somebody called Patrick Maguire. I'm not sure whether he's related to Kevin Maguire of the Daily Mirror, but he's a Maguire, name is Maguire. He's saying that Corbyn, oddly, has become the most hated former Labour Party leader since Tony Blair. Now, the editorial has got similar kind of things, but not exactly in that blunt way. And there is a self-confessed liar who has been having too long a career as a columnist on the Murdoch Times. Murdoch has got a variety of stooges that he pays and keeps his appearance of diversity alive. Diversity that is excluding African and Asian people of original thought and thinking and commitment. And that would not change for another century or so. All the thinkers that even the so-called Nobel kind of stamp was given on are still regarded in Britain and the West as not existing. For example, Tagore, he was given the Nobel Prize in 1913. Now, this is kind of more than 100 years ago. And yet Tagore is not mentioned. Now, the reason I'm mentioning Tagore is because he is one of the most prolific essayists and commentators and writers covering contemporary issues of all kinds. So regardless of whether anyone agrees with him or not, the fact that he wrote so profusely and his writings, by all accounts, are deeper than any other contemporary writer writing in Bangla, which Tagore wrote. But Tagore also wrote in English, but the main language he used was Bangla. If they can ignore Tagore for more than 100 years, it is impossible to think that they would do anything different from anyone who doesn't have the stamp of the Nobel laureate behind them. And there have been other Nobel laureates, whatever the disputes about the kind of genuineness of the persons receiving the Nobel Prize. And before Tagore, there was a man called Michael. Now, notice the name. He's a Bengali, but his name is Michael Madhusudan Datta. Now, the name is a clue because he adopted the Michael name. He was so kind of true to the Macaulay agenda that he adopted spontaneously. He became the Englishman inside and the brown person outside. So he came to Britain as part of the empire and the connections, and so many did. He came here, and as later did Muhammad Iqbal. Now, Iqbal was given a knighthood by the British, and Madhusudan Datta wasn't given any known kind of title or honor or gong. But Madhusudan is, like Tagore, a very deep thinker, as is Iqbal, Muhammad Iqbal. And yet there is no sign of Tagore, Madhusudan Datta, or Tagore or Iqbal in the references, in the kind of notes, in the conventional, ordinary commentary and writings of the journalists or the academics or the politicians, of course, or the social commentators. So in the papers, there will be nothing that is written by or originally contributed by an Asian person or an African person, and most certainly not by a Muslim. There is nothing in the papers in Fleet Street. So that's the first thing that anyone viewing this from outside of the UK and outside of the EU needs to know. Because although the papers are published in London, the London-centric papers are also used as standard kind of packs of references daily by the selected students and scholars across Western Europe and other parts. And some of the titles like the Times and the Telegraph, the Borisgraph, and the Guardian get wider circulation across the world. So anyone reading these titles would know that even the Guardian, which prides itself as being less racist than the rest of the Fleet Street, is part of the racist kind of status quo that operates in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, North America, that is USA, and parts of Southern Africa, as well as, of course, in Western Europe and in the UK. But the frames of references are limited, very seriously limited to denying the existence of the world. How can these people who are admitting now, today the Times is the one that is running this one from the self-confessed, he's Rhodesia born and self-confessed liar and assorted many other things. He's Matthew Paris, he's the one that incited. Matthew Paris is a right-winger, of course, is a conservative. He was a conservative MP and he was a denier. He was a denier of the fact that people paid benefits. People paid benefits in the kind of in the 70s that he was an MP. During the 70s, he was an MP. During the 80s, I think I can check that one and update on that particular reference in terms of time and the date. When he was an MP, he was, of course, a fan of Margaret Thatcher's. And it is probably true that he scripted some of the stuff that she delivered, either speeches or memos, whatever. And he's a self-confessed writer of lies. And just like Saitan Rushdie is a self-confessed writer of lies. Rushdie himself has admitted he has lied many times, and as has this one. But the most important topical thing about this column today in the Murdoch Times by this Paris is that his piece's headline, "Our leaders should admit they are totally lost." Now, such a comment, such an opinion, if expressed or if originally attributable to a person who is not of kind of Anglo-Saxon or kind of Southern Africa-born white background, but of Black African background, original Black African background, not a demented Black African or demented Asian kind of background, because many of the people in power in various states across Africa and Asia are manifestly, based on their records, demented dictators and anti-democrats. So let no one assume for a moment that only because I condemn the racism of the Fleet Street and the British kind of status quo brands of politicians, that I don't see or am hesitant to recognize the corruption that is ravaging across the continents of Africa and Asia. In fact, the last 70 years, the Financial Times yesterday ran a piece about a supplement called Nigeria at 60. But Nigeria is probably younger compared to other countries. that were colonized by the British, with the exception of Southern Africa. And let's say the foundation of the United Nations 75 years ago coincided with the emergence of, quote, nation states in Africa and Asia. Africa less in number than in Asia, but they did emerge about the same time, many of them, significant numbers. But the existence of the United Nations for 75 years has not been accompanied by the establishment of democracy across Africa and Asia, which is one reason why the poverty, the level of poverty and starvation and hunger, and the lack of civil liberties as universally defined and understood in the context of the founding aims and objects of the United Nations, but going back even to the time of Socrates, despite the fact that Socrates had so much reservation genuinely about democracy itself as a model. And we know that Churchill himself said that democracy is the worst form, but it is better than the alternative, by which he meant, of course, fascism. But some of those, quite apart from the criticism that exists validly against Churchill over his role in creating the genocide of the Bengalis, millions of Bengalis in 1943, the opinion he expressed about democracy was expressed in the immediate kind of environment of the fight against Nazi Germany. So when he said that the alternative was even more dangerous, he was obviously referring to what Germany, the Nazis, did. Now, those who are pretending, impersonating Churchill's image as has been created in this country in the years since 1945, they are now rejecting Churchill's rejection of fascism. And they are actually operating as populist recruiters of fascists and to the fascist cause. And in the history of this country, Britain, fascists have not been ever hidden, and fascists have not been created by the so-called poverty-stricken people. Fascism has been always pushed by the ruling, controlling class and group. And today's far-right enthusiasts in the House of Commons and the Conservative Party, fronted by Boris Johnson and his cabal, are, most of them, sympathetic to the fascist ideology. And that is not what he is saying. Matthew Paris, who lives in Tower Hamlets part of the time, which is a mysterious kind of choice for him, which we shall examine in interesting detail at some point, not this edition, but sometime. But Matthew Paris has also got a kind of plush country residence, which he shares with his same-sex partner or partners. Now, why he has been living in Limehouse is absolutely astounding, but it's not astounding when you get the facts. And why has he been sympathetic, at least on the record in one piece that we found, to groups of Bangladeshi boys? Why? Because he, as a known racist on the record who is hostile to Bangladeshis in Tower Hamlets, as he expressed in July 2005, when he kind of called on the then London undone mayor, that is Ken Livingston Livingston, to force Crossrail through Brick Lane. I mean, Matthew Paris could not use stronger language in his hostility and ferocity against the Bangladeshis that were targeted by the Crossrail hold, which is why the Khoodeelaar campaign had been established 2 years earlier by me. As a continuation of the campaign, I've been defending the Brick Lane with various campaigns, and that was the latest one at that stage. So why would Matthew Paris write a sympathetic piece about Bangladeshi boys in Limehouse? That is a very serious question. Now, this piece he has written today is headlined, "Our leaders should admit they are totally lost." Now, he's not talking about racist leaders. He's not talking about prejudiced leaders. He's talking about, it's a kind of jokey kind of way, it's like a matey kind of way, it's like a friendship that he has with them. He is their friends, and they are his friends. So he's saying that they are lost and they can mend the kind of system that they are kind of unable to govern. This is the thing that he says at the end of the piece. If there is any truth in the observation that electorates are growing tired, then it is sweeping statement and cocksure reprimands we are growing tired of. The most an honest prime minister or health secretary should say is, bear with us. This is a mess, but we are doing our best. Now, that does not correspond with the headline, does it? If our leaders should admit they are totally lost, if they are totally lost, then how can that be the concluding paragraph in that piece, that we are doing our best? So that should have been in the headline. If they are doing their best, then that our leaders are doing their best. Notice the subliminal factors at play in that particular Times newspaper, and the editing and the presentation and the display and the brainwashing. Of course, Matthew Paris himself, being a racist, does not believe that there is any problem caused by racism in this country at any stage. And Matthew Paris is often given platform on other kind of mainstream platforms like the BBC and Sky News, both BBC Radio and BBC Television. And he is presented as a sage. And why is he presented as a sage? Because he's duplicitous, he's dishonest and he has got treble standards, and he is, of course, a racist as one of us. As Margaret Thatcher's cabal apparently refer to one another, one of us. Of course, Matthew Paris is not Jeremy Corbyn, so therefore he will not be derided in the way that Corbyn has been derided now. I mean, he was derided yesterday, Friday's papers, because of the Thursday publication of the racist equality and human rights corruption and violation outfit that Hattie Harman that is Harriet Harman had set up with the collusion of the mental slave Trevor Terrible Phillips. And Corbyn is now dominating Saturday's Fleet Street papers as the bad guy. And they're saying that he's preparing fundraising to fight the Labour Party in court. Now, that is not something unheard of or unprecedented. Labour Party and court challenges among Labour Party members is more common than it is in the other parties. And the reason is simply that the Labour Party, despite the failure of the party to deliver on the original founding aims for the foundation of the party, it is the only party where there is any kind of debate about the issues affecting society. So we shall be continuing in detail in part 2. This has been a shorter